Greetings. Welcome to Life Empowered Living Room. Welcome to the podcast. I am so glad that you are here with me on today, and I'm glad that you're a part. I have such a special guest with me on today, and I want to introduce you to my girl, Sandra Kinley. She is the founder of Invest in You LLC. Now, that has already just piqued all of my attention. I'm excited to hear about it and excited for her to share about it. But let's just greet her first. Hey, Sandra.
Hey, Celeste. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where people are calling in from. Thank you so much for the invitation. Really blessed to be here and excited for our conversation today.
So I usually start with kind of a quick 7 or, fast 5 questions, but I am really interested in hearing about your Invest in You organization. Can you tell me about that? Then we'll do the other stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Sounds good. So I guess it really started with content creation when I was in college. I had done some branding around personal development, coaching, public speaking, because throughout my college career and early career, I had joined a network marketing business and wanted to put my best foot out there as a coach, mentor, and speaker. So I had just started putting out content on LinkedIn, and I used hashtag invest in you for people that could follow that specific content. And I had always felt this itch to continue to coach and mentor people. I just didn't really know what that was going to look like. And personal development and growth has been such a foundational base in my life as a woman of color, as an employee, and now embarking on a different layer of entrepreneurship, and wanted to dive into my business. So that's kind of where Invest in You LLC was birthed, and with a backing on the mission of, as we invest in ourselves, it adds value to the collective around us. Because people can truly feel that energy and that momentum when someone is working on themselves and growing themselves internally and boosting their confidence, their self-esteem. People can really feel that momentum, and that creates a ripple effect within those around us. So that's the really the mission of Invest in You. Also powered by a lot of the content that John Maxwell, a leadership guru well known around the globe, has put out. So a lot of the foundational content that I've put together has been utilized by John Maxwell, while I'm also integrating my voice, my story, my experience in various coaching sessions, typically group coaching sessions, or just speaking opportunities to various individuals. My focus is really within employee resource groups, whether they're women-led, minority-led, LGBTQ, veteran. That's kind of the key focal points or areas of people that I'm looking to invest into. So.
Okay, I love that. And so now, as we're talking about, kind of the business and the mission of Invest in You, I know that my audience also wants to get to know you. That was me that jumped the gun because I was so curious about that title and that theme of your business, but we definitely want to get to know you. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. So just bear with me. You ready?
Sounds good. Let's jump into it.
What's your favorite cereal?
I actually really like Raisin Bran. Like growing up, I mean, I love the sweet stuff, don't get me wrong, but Raisin Bran is what I've eaten the most of recently.
I love that. I love that. Okay. What's your favorite cartoon?
SpongeBob.
SpongeBob. Okay. Tell me why. Is it the water? Is it?
Yeah, I just think the comedy, I mean, I watched it growing up, and it's interesting too how like the makers and producers of cartoons will weave in like adult humor too. So just as I've watched them again as an adult and a grown up, it's just funny hearing like the intricacies of like adult humor within the TV show too. And it's lasted so long too. I mean, I think like SpongeBob's probably like 40 at this point.
He definitely has the longevity. Okay, your favorite candy?
Oh, I'd say Twix or Snickers. Like I like chocolate for
Okay.
sure.
Okay. Yeah. Snickers wins.
Yeah.
Snickers wins. So I'm a Snickers girl. Okay. What was your favorite subject in school?
Gym, probably. I mean,
Gym.
just like being active. Yeah, I was
Okay.
an athlete growing up, swam, ran track, played volleyball. So I just feel like sports and athletics was a big thing growing up.
Okay. Okay. Now we started off our conversation talking about the business Invest in You. We've asked you a few questions about you per se. And then as I think about kind of this whole thing of totality, those two chapters, I'll call it that.
Mhm.
And then also thinking about the underneath the guise of coaching and coaching being forward thinking.
Mhm.
What would you say the next chapter in your book of life would be? What would you call that chapter?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, I think, I don't know, breaking into my most authentic self.
Mm,
Kind of a long one, but I feel like, and like breaking into just, or evolving into maybe utilizing
mhm,
some of those expansive words.
mhm, mhm,
And not to say that I haven't been my authentic self per se, it's just more so beating down the fear of
mhm,
judgment,
mhm,
the fear of, what are people going to say? How are they going to, feel about what I'm
mhm,
doing?
mhm,
Um, just because there was just kind of a point in my life where I felt really bogged down and lost,
mhm,
and lost sight of my authentic self, or really what my purpose was. Because something I've just kind of struggled with within my corporate job is not really feeling like my work is purposeful and leaving an impact,
mm,
on those around me. And also how I've looked at work. Because when I think of work, I think of mundane, I think of boring. So it's
mhm,
almost like reprogramming my mindset on, work should be fun, work should give you life,
mhm,
work should be impactful and purposeful.
mhm,
So I just feel like in evolving and breaking into my authenticity or my authentic self, it's because the work that I'm doing is purposeful and leaving an impact.
mhm, mhm. I love that. But I have a question because in listening to you, these are the words that you used: breaking, bogged, and beating. So from my perspective, those feel like very intentional and
Mm-hmm.
also very aggressive terms.
Mm,
So for me, it feels like you have a high sense of urgency to get to this next level, next layer, next phase, next whatever you want to call it, um, in life. Are you sensing that there's just like this? I've been here too long. I got to do
but
something different.
yeah, right. Yeah, I think I would say it's interesting because I feel like it is a little bit of a double-edged sword, in the sense of I've really worked on my patience and
Okay.
allowing, kind of surrendering to, God as you see him, our
Mhm,
universal source, connectivity. But just allowing myself, the patience and surrendering while slowly making progressive steps every day.
mhm, mhm,
Um, but also I think I've also, in terms of like, bogged down and I don't know, breaking kind of just like came to mind initially. But um, I think I've wrestled with just not feeling like my work is purposeful for a
mhm,
while. And it's
mhm,
almost that, I guess, I feel like we're either some inspired in action or we're frustrated and then we act. And I
mhm,
think like I've really kind of wrestled with that frustration, or wrestled with that uncertainty of, well, what is it going to look like? How is it
mhm,
going to be put together?
mhm,
And I think there's, so much that we can do it, but also allowing ourselves, the faith and the surrendering, if you will,
mhm,
to allow the blessings to come to you and to
mhm,
be receptive
mhm.
to what that looks like.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. I love that. And so as you are, being receptive to what's new, what's breaking into your authentic you, evolving into a more authentic you, tell me a little bit about that corporate career that you've had. Like, What are some lessons? And then what are some of those pain points as well when you feel like you're not operating in your purpose or not
Mm,
being purposeful with what you're doing?
yeah. So yeah, to give a background of my corporate career. So my background is I got a bachelor's in supply chain and operations management. So I've got a BA. And when I graduated from UW Milwaukee, I worked at Rockwell Automation, which was an incredible experience. I thoroughly enjoyed my experience there. I was a buyer in the indirect sourcing team for about a year and a half, and then was promoted into a commodity manager role, where I managed the HR service umbrella, and then transitioned into IT services. And I would say a couple things. One thing that really stood out to me when I had my first promotion, because granted, I was probably 23-ish, in that age range. And when I was having conversation with my manager at the time, I don't want to say it wasn't heard of, but rarely did you see a buyer go straight to a commodity manager.
Okay.
Usually a buyer would be an analyst, and then kind of support other departments, and then embark on the commodity management type of position. And I want to say it was within the first like 2 weeks of that role, I had gone out to lunch with my boss and one of our vendors that helped with our recruitment. And we had gone around the table and everyone was introducing themselves. And I kid you not, I would say the average amount of time that those folks were in their role was probably between 15 to 25 years.
Mm.
And in that moment, I felt imposter syndrome, because it's like, well, who am I to have stepped, being a 20 something year old, stepping into this, position, and feeling like, I don't want to say like I skipped roles, but, being kind of like catapulted within this role. And I feel like imposter syndrome is something to some extent we've all experienced, whether it is in our career, whether it is, stepping into the space of entrepreneurship, or just transitioning industries completely. There is just that sense of, imposter syndrome. And then also just feeling really young. And I mean, I was, but it's also just like, I had to realize that if my boss didn't see, that potential within, me, she wouldn't have, promoted me within that. So having that level of support and, someone seeing kind of my potential and allowing me to step into that potential was something that I appreciated. But it also challenged me to, overcome that fear and that like imposter syndrome. And, I earned this spot, whatever anyone else was saying about it. So that was something that I felt like was a turning point for me in my career. And then as I was supporting the IT service space, a lot was kind of going on in life. My mom had passed away. I was starting to feel lost. I had lost my fiance at the time, and I separated. So there was a lot of just a personal tsunami that was kind of going on in the background, and I just needed a break. So then at that point, I transitioned to, if you want to call it, I don't want to say a step down, but I pursued a different role as an analyst with a different company. And that, even just like that transition within itself, it brought less stress. It was a very much smaller team. I almost felt like the new kid on the block. And also just dealing with other types of leadership styles. One that was a little bit more hands-on than I was used to, or micromanaging, some may say. And that felt a little like suffocating, and felt I didn't really feel like I was empowered to make decisions or make changes, just because it was going to be, analyzed with a scalpel. And once I was able to remove my, I guess, like emotion from it, and just realizing that's how that leader managed everyone, that was a big, I guess, another turning point for me, was just not taking things personally, especially if that's how people just move. So that was some good, self-awareness. in the process of also healing from a lot of loss that
Mm-hmm.
happened in a very short period of time. So yeah, I mean, definitely lots to unpack there and a long
Yeah.
answer to that, but that's kind of how my career has unfolded.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I love that. And, in both of the examples that you cited there, one of the things that I observed was a lens shift where maybe I went in feeling like as a new in my role as a manager, I felt like I didn't belong because there were so many others. But then my lens had to shift because if my manager thought that I was supposed to be here, then something had to be right for me to be here. And then even in this last one where your manager in this different role feels like a micromanager, but really that's just their style. So that
Right.
it's not personal. And so one of the things that, I know you're very familiar with, myself as well, as that emotional intelligence, that self-awareness,
Yep.
and then that self-management, that social awareness, as well as that social management. So, in both of those examples, you had to experience, right, those things in order for the shift to happen.
Yep.
What's something that you could say to the new 23-year-old that got promoted in a room of different people, different age group, different demographic, whatever, to get them to the place where they don't have to go through the pain of the learning, but take the lesson and live that part out? What could you say to them?
Yeah. I would say grace is the first word that comes to mind, is having grace with yourself through a learning process.
Mm,
Because I allow myself, and this was also something that I had to place myself in, but I allow myself 6 to 8 months to really ruminate and learn and kind of like make mistakes in a new role, because you're
okay.
not going to get everything right away.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
allowing yourself grace in that, especially for a I don't want to say a grade A personality, but a type A
mm-hmm,
personality, and someone who wants, and like, obviously work on your game plan and your, and working with your manager on what goals that you need to move forward. It's not like you're
mm-hmm,
not, working and learning throughout that process, but just having grace with yourself through that
mm-hmm,
process,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and know that mistakes and trials and tribulations, like utilizing that as fuel to move you forward and not stagnate you.
mm-hmm.
Because I feel like we can be, and John Maxwell talks about this a lot, is we can be a victor or a victim,
Yeah,
right? So it's okay to have a pity party and eat a bunch of ice cream on the couch, watch your movie, but that can't last. You know what I
right,
mean?
right.
If you want to progress forward. So I just feel like having grace with yourself through the process, being a sponge and learning.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, I always had a notepad, always was asking questions and just
mm-hmm,
taking notes, writing things down to retain them, and then applying what I was learning.
mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and just having grace with the mistakes, because it's not if, it's when you'll
It's
make
fun. Yeah.
mistakes.
And one of the things too, Sandra, about you, and we've not talked about it actually, is how we connected. We connected at Rockwell, but the
Yeah.
bigger piece of that is that you reached out to me and said, "Hey, Celeste, I know you do this conference. If you need any volunteers, I would love to engage." And so, you talked about listening and applying what you've learned, but there's one more additional thing that I think people need to know is the proactivity, and so I know we talked a little bit about imposter syndrome, but what gave you the confidence to be proactive and reach out and say, "Hey, I'd love to be a part"? How did you
Mm.
get there?
I would say I was really attracted to your energy and because yeah, you were helping us through I was a part of the African American Professional Network Employee Resource Group, and you were helping us through goal setting
Mm-hmm,
and also working within our committees within the ERG.
mm-hmm,
And I was like, man, I really want to do that. Like, there was a sense of curiosity.
mm-hmm,
There was a sense of just, again, that attraction, because what you brought forth was what I wanted more of.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, and I would say, even taking a step back in terms of the personal development that I was investing in myself, was
mm-hmm,
reading books from John Maxwell, Brian
Mhm.
Tracy, various other, Brene Brown, the list of authors could go on. And I was like listening to podcasts. So I was putting kind of like growth mentality, goal setting into
Mhm.
my mind already
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
before we had met, through that goal setting process and event. And that's kind of what I was just taking incremental steps of putting myself in a
Mhm.
environments
Mhm.
and being around people that shared that same, growth mentality, goal setting, forward moving energy, if you will.
So that's, one of the things that you've just said here, and you've said it a couple of times, is incremental steps, like that progression. And
Mhm.
so when you think about, you're in a place and you're doing a thing, but now you still have to take incremental steps to go forward. What are some things that you're doing to help manage all of the things that you're juggling, moving forward, but yet being anchored here at the same
Right.
time?
Oh my gosh. And it is a work in progress.
I know it for all of us.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it's in my other room, but I every morning I do start with looking at my calendar and journaling.
Hmm.
And then also utilizing my e-calendar online as well. I've got 4 different emails I'm checking throughout the day.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so many calendars and stuff. But I would just say the two things is doing a morning journal has
Hmm.
been helpful. I call it my 3-3 exercise. So I write 3 things in 3 different buckets. So the first
Hmm.
bucket is 3 things that I'm grateful for. The second bucket is 3 wins that happened the day before. So it's kind of
Hmm.
just, putting my foot forward with what I progressed on the day before.
Hmm.
And then what 3 things I could do today that would make today progressive.
Hmm.
And it could be anything from, sending out a few emails for speaking gigs. It could be dancing.
Hmm.
It could be, reading. So it's a wide array of things that I could be writing down, but that has been
Hmm.
helpful as a morning journal.
Hmm.
And then the other piece is just blocking off time on my calendar. Sometimes I get to it. I would say I've got maybe a 75% hit rate. So it's not always done.
Hmm.
Transparently, it could be from procrastination on my end.
Hmm.
Or I feel like I had a good conversation with my sister on like self-sabotage and my dad too. And just realizing what that is. 'Cause
Hmm.
I was like, I don't sabotage myself. But it's like when
Do it
you
every
think of
day.
just small things like,
Hmm.
oh, I should have called, or XYZ person, or, I didn't really make a post on LinkedIn today. But it's just like those small things
Hmm.
that do add up. Incremental could be forward and it could be backwards.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's just the truth of it. And it just depends on the season of life you're in and everything you got going on. But yeah, I would say just doing something daily, even if
Hmm.
it is just journaling, it and when you say you're going to do something and you do it, like
Hmm.
that is, I feel like, the precipice of building your self-esteem and building your self-confidence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a checklist. I have a daily checklist, and I laugh at myself because I have just normal human things you're supposed to do on my checklist, like cook.
Yeah.
And I got a little box and I check it. So I've been laughing because I was like, last night I told my husband, so guess what? I only have on my calendar to cook 3 times a week, and I've cooked 2. So that was Sunday and Monday.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm
believe
so proud of myself.
seriously.
It's something it's something so satisfying and gratifying about being able to set that task and just the check that you have accomplished it. So that is hilarious.
Agreed.
So now you've talked about a lot, and I really want to ask you this question. You absolutely do not have to answer it, but I'm curious because I know that you are not the only person that has experienced this,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the loss of your mom.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about during that time, a lot of things transpired, with the job, relationship, and then, kind of the loss of her, and my deepest condolences for that. Um, but I see you here today and I see you smiling. And so my question is, how did you get you back?
Mm,
Because I know that's a dark place.
yeah. Oh, yeah, grounding.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Right,
my
right.
tears
Yeah.
back too.
Thank you so much for the question. And it's so interesting. So yeah, I guess I'm trying to formalize how I want to answer this. So I'll go back. Because I was next to her. It was I'll never forget. It was April 9th at 2:42 p.m. I was there, my brother was there, my aunt and uncle were there. Um, and I know that was like how she wanted to go, you know what I
Mhm,
mean,
mhm,
with her family by her. And I mean, I remember because and my dad had lost my grandmother some years ago. I was in middle school. And in reflection now I understand what he was saying, but like in terms of her like planning for a funeral and the immediate, like that's not the hard part. It's
mhm.
learning to live without them
Yes.
is the tough part.
Yep.
And because I just remember being on autopilot because a lot of the planning for her funeral, kind of getting her home together after like everything, putting in storage and stuff, kind of fell on me as I
Mhm,
kind of figured it was going to, but um I almost just felt like I was like a robot, like I was just like operating. I didn't really know
mhm,
what was going on, and at the time, and it's again, I find this just interesting, but a lot of what I was doing in life, building my network marketing business, focusing on myself was to provide her a better life and then to provide my future family with my ex-fiance at the time our future. So a lot
mhm,
of what I was working for and working on at that time in life was for her.
mhm,
And even now being 2 years and some change beyond her passing time, I still do it for her.
mhm,
She is like my main reason because
mhm,
it's like, and again, this just goes back to spirituality and energy. It's just like, although she's not here physically, I know she is here in a different spiritual sense.
mhm,
And that, although I miss her physically, I mean, that gives me a lot of comfort
mhm,
and
mhm,
security. And I mean, like I said, don't get me wrong, a lot of tears still too, but there was just definitely a loss of purpose, a loss of self,
mhm,
a loss of feeling grounded. Like it was just like, because something for me and everyone's process is different, but like you're in such a vulnerable space in grief,
mhm,
not making any like I guess like immediate life changes was something that I was like grateful that I didn't do just
mhm,
because I wasn't in a great headspace.
mhm,
um, and I was also in a relationship with someone that wasn't like he had lost his mom, and that it almost felt like we kind of bonded over the trauma of the
mhm,
loss of mothers,
mhm,
but there were just a lot of habits that were very toxic,
mhm,
and just like unhealthy for me in
mhm,
that time of grief.
mhm,
um so just being in a space that is so vulnerable, it can be easy for people to kind of come in and manipulate or control and not even like really realize it. So yeah, I mean, and there was always just this seed of like, my mother didn't raise a punk, I like kind of just going back to that and really like
right.
channeling her energy and what she sewed into me, because I was predominantly raised by my mother and my grandmother growing up, and grew into a better relationship with my father as an adult. um but yeah, I don't know, there was this seed of hope
Mhm,
in this dark space, and it really just showed me, I mean, the preciousness of life and how fragile life is.
mhm,
And I find myself not having attachments to a lot of things the way that I did,
mhm,
just because we're all going to go out at some point, so it's like
mhm,
I can't take
mhm,
it, like take anything with me. So it's just, I feel like I'm in the business of making myself happy and joyous because, this life is just so fragile and there is so much pain people are going through, that I want to be a light for
Mm-hmm.
people. I want to be that kind of like
Mm-hmm.
sounding board as much as I can too,
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
because like although the base and foundation of who I am is the same, my capacity is a little down just because of
Mm-hmm.
that, and I'll continue to work on getting it back, but
Mm-hmm.
also kind of putting in boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely.
I really, in closing, this is also a very long answer, but I leaned into my faith. I
Mm-hmm.
leaned into what felt good, like yoga, swimming. Um, Florida is my, space of healing. There's a place that I go in Florida that I cleanse myself in the ocean, um, to kind of release it back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're very,
Very cool.
yeah, a lot had went down that first year after
Yeah.
she.
Yeah. And it's, you know what? And I always tell people, my father has been gone 22 years, and there's still days 22 years later that I'm like, I miss my daddy. And
Yeah.
it's just what it is. But for me, it also, the journey has moved a little bit from grief that it's gone, but in more of to a celebration that I had him. You know what I
Mm,
mean? So it
yeah.
shifted just a little bit, but it's a process of time. But I also, as I said, I just know so many people that have, lost that loved one, and they are struggling. And so
Hmm.
the fact that, you can say, yep, I did it too. I lost it too. However, we're coming, it's gonna come up. It's gonna
Yeah.
get better. There is a ray of light. There is hope. I think
Yeah.
that is just tremendous. That is just overall tremendous. And so now when you think about, everything that you've been through, think about all of your experiences up until this very moment. What would you tell your younger self?
Uh, Honestly, just like don't take it so seriously. Like I
Mm,
feel like I and I feel like I can do this to a fault, but sometimes like when I focus on something, I put my blinders on and like I'm just here. You know what I mean?
uh-huh,
Like I don't
uh-huh,
see this opportunity or this opportunity. Like I put my blinders on and I was just like so in the grind of things from like I like 19 until like around when my mom died. And it's crazy too, but I just felt like it took, unfortunately, for my mom to die for me to stop
uh-huh,
and like
uh-huh,
really pause and ponder and just like not take life so seriously. Like I think like have fun, like take
uh-huh,
time to like
uh-huh,
have fun. Yeah, I think I grinded, and the grind was fun. Don't get me wrong, and you do have to grind.
uh-huh,
That it does have to take work, but also including fun in that, and just like
uh-huh.
not taking stuff so seriously.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
personally too, I
yeah,
feel like
yeah.
I could have kind of cut down a lot of the stress that I was having, if I just wouldn't have kind of taken things so seriously.
I love that. I love that. And so, as you know, you've evolved, and we talked about lens changes and even how, life has just changed for you. Can you tell me about the people around you? How did they change?
Mm.
The people that were with you when you were in that constant grind, are they the same folks with you now that you don't take everything so seriously?
That I appreciate that question so much. I
You
I
got
want
rid of everybody, huh?
I'm trying to think. I mean, most of my inner circle is the same. I mean, the friends that I grew up with, the people that I would have stand up at my wedding, are the same.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the people that I was like in touch with, when I built my network marketing business are really no longer in my life. Um, a lot of any like toxicity that I felt like was coming in my life from people, I really let that go.
Okay.
Um, and it's interesting too because as I've changed, so have my inner circle and my friends as
Mm-hmm.
well. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
There were there's one friend in particular that I've known since like kindergarten. And even like we had a conversation too, because he was like in a relationship with someone and kind of it was going through things I didn't know, but he wasn't really there for me after my mom died.
Mhm.
And some years passed, but we had talked about it, and like I was kind of sharing, this is where I was at, and like even and seeing the growth, but also some of the stumbling blocks that he had gone through. Um, and even like our dynamic, we're still best friends and stuff, but the dynamic of our friendship has changed because of the nature of who we are has changed.
Mhm.
So to your point and your question, it's just like I don't talk to a lot of the people that I did, at that
Mhm.
point. Some of them I have still stayed around, just in
Mhm.
terms of like share of values, and now want, more of what the coaching and speaking that I'm doing now of, because that's like a gap in their life that they want to fill. But yeah, I mean, in terms of my immediate friends and family, I've completely
Yeah.
revamped and changed like the landscape of my life,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. And that's important to do. I'm always curious because, you know, as friends, we value the longevity of
Yeah.
a relationship so much. However, if you've changed and they're not willing to adapt, or you're not willing to adapt, then there's always this um, churn, I'll call it, or this
Mhm.
tension. And sometimes it's okay to say, I love you enough that I will see you on major holidays
Yep.
and be great. You know what I mean? And there's
Right.
nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
But sometimes we don't always want to do that. But when we change, I think that it's important to have a person that is willing to evolve and
Mhm.
value you enough to change with you. And I have to have that conversation a lot in relation, in coupleships, because they're like, oh, my person's changed. That's not who they were when I met them 20 years ago. Yeah, it's been 20 years. It's
Yep.
365 days, 20 times over. They're not going to be the same. And that's okay. Now, if you're the same after 365 days, 20 times, we got another issue.
That's scary.
So,
Mhm.
but yeah, being able to recognize that and kind of pivot where necessary, I think
Yeah.
it's important to do. So, with all of the change, with all of the adaptation, realignment, how do you handle failure? And is it different today from yesterday?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I actually saw Tyler Perry. I love Tyler Perry. I'd love to work with Tyler Perry. I'll throw that in the universe at some point in my life. But he was asked the same question, and he answered it as I have none. Like I have no failures, because it's just the step forward.
Lesson. Yeah.
It moves you into a space, and I want to quote him in that, because it's almost like, I mean, there is a little bit, like I like kick myself, like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. But then it's like, where is the silver lining
Hmm.
in the failure? What was the lesson that I was
Hmm.
supposed to
Hmm.
learn? And also taking that within a grain of salt, because I feel like I've almost gone into reflection mode where I'm almost too reflective,
Hmm.
but also, like, oh, well, I'm just gonna, put that under the rug and whatever.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think just like taking some time for reflection, figuring out what that lesson is, and to just not do it again. I mean,
Hmm.
the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, or making the failure over and over and over, and not learning from it and making the change needed in order to move forward. So I just feel like failure, as Tyler Perry said, I have none. It's to move me in a direction that, God wanted me to move in.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. John Maxwell, he actually has a book says you win some or you learn some. So he
Mm,
doesn't even use the term lose, to your point. And
yeah,
it's so good, because that what we call as a fail, in retrospect of what Tyler Perry says, is that that's just to get us back on the path that he wants us on. So it's not, again, a loss.
yeah,
So super powerful, super
yeah.
powerful. So what do you think are the things that's been critical? Well, before I ask you this question, let me ask you this question. How do you define success?
Mm. And that has changed over time as well.
I'm here for it.
I was just talking to my partner last night, actually, because he'll be making the move in with me next year.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was just like, because I was just wrestling with what does us building together look like? I'm
Mm-hmm.
excited
Mm-hmm.
for it. And I felt like he said it so beautifully and I insert having peace of mind where there is no financial stress to live to live with, I don't know, no, I don't want to say barriers, because barriers and problems will find you,
Mm-hmm.
but it's having a peace of mind to where you're just focused on unconditional love and giving and living purposefully. And
Mm-hmm.
that looks different for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For me personally, it's being able to sow into at least one person a day and
Mm-hmm.
helping them progress and, meeting them with where they're at in life. And also having a family and stuff like that. So I do, aspire to be a mother, God willing, in the future. And raising phenomenal kids as
Mm-hmm.
well, building a good home base. But just having peace of mind, no financial stress, and making an impact really
Mm-hmm.
and giving. And I feel like I still am, what's going to be my legacy and stuff like that. And I feel like, kids and family will be, but also, um, yeah, just, I mean, people remember how you made them feel. They don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily always remember, what you said, but it's just like, hey, I really liked Sandra because she made me feel heard. She
Mm-hmm.
made me feel wanted. She made me feel inclusive,
Mm-hmm.
and I could relate to her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's what, and I was listening to Roddy Galbraith, I believe is his name. He
Mm-hmm.
was talking through some of what has been your biggest speaking recommendations or whatnot, and it's when the audience and who you're speaking to um, feel like a sense of acknowledgement and they can relate to you, because it's just
Mm-hmm.
like if you can't relate to someone or create that common ground, um, there's kind of just like, I guess, that gap where you don't feel that sense of connectivity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's what I would say is,
Okay.
peace of mind, financial wealth and abundance, so that I'm able to, move at a rate with my family that feels purposeful and impactful.
So now, one of the things that you said in your answer, though, and I'm super curious about this, is that you want people to walk away feeling like, as a result of an interaction with you, they've had an impact, they feel heard, they feel seen, validated,
Mm-hmm.
um, they have all of the feels. Um, where do you find your mentors so that you can walk away with those feels? Who supports you?
That's a good one. um, my the first person that comes to mind is my dad,
Okay.
actually. So I really lean into my dad. Like I said, he wasn't there much growing up, but we were able to foster and really get to know one another,
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
my adulthood. Um, and he's seen a lot, been through a lot in his own right in his own life, but has also seen my adversity and my challenges and my loss and grief, and has seen me on the other side of it
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of, someone that I lean into for advice or as a sounding board and really anything, he's
Mm-hmm.
one of the first people that I go to. Um, I would also say the John Maxwell community.
Mm-hmm.
There are tens of thousands of
Yeah.
people across the globe. And I have found a couple folks that and even you being one of them, but, folks that I'll reach out to bounce some
Mm-hmm.
things off of, or content. Um, but yeah, transparently, I'm still receptive to finding someone that
Mm-hmm.
is, someone in a professional or even personal sense outside of just therapy, which I'm a huge advocate of as
Mm-hmm.
well in terms of grief counseling. Big plug there, I think. Absolutely pursue therapy if you need it. But I would say transparently that was kind of a gap coming out of my network marketing venture, because mentorship was such a big thing within that once I stepped out of that, all my mentors kind of flew out the door, to be honest. So and also just kind of working through, because I feel like I can be, I don't want to say naive, but I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, and that has stung me in the past. So I'm still kind of in pursuit of outside of just family, people that I can like truly rely on, that are in the field and have maybe accomplished or like are 5 steps forward in the line of works that I'm wanting to pursue. Because I'm still within, the beginning process of that. So yeah, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Gosh, Sandra, I can't believe that we've been talking about 45 minutes already. This has been so good to me. Thank you so much. But as we wrap up, I do have one more question for you. I'm really interested in what else that you can offer the audience that will be listening to this. When you think about something that people can do immediately today, right now, so that they could live life empowered, what would you direct them to do? What would you encourage them to do?
I feel like we all have something that we wanted to try or wanted to do. And I would encourage people to take whatever step that is. Whether, and I'll speak for myself in various areas. So I'm very analytical by nature. So I've been working on my creative crafts, and one of them is acting. So submitting an audition for something, pursuing representation. Additionally, even from a speaking perspective, I know a lot of people struggle with public speaking. So maybe public speaking isn't in your realm, but networking and meeting people. Coming out of COVID, I was wobbly having in-person conversations. I'm sure we probably all were to some capacity, like, oh, there's a human there. I don't know how to talk to them. So I would encourage people to go out and network and meet someone new, go to an organization that you've been curious about learning. Because it's in that space of curiosity, it's in that space of maybe a little uncertainty that you'll find something new, and using that energy to catapult you, whether it may pertain to that or it may not. But it's putting yourself in new spaces to allow yourself to be creative, to allow yourself to get empowered. Because when we change our environment, that also can spark creativity, that can spark a new idea, and that can spark change and a ripple effect.
I love that. That's so good. And that is definitely something that anybody can do immediately. There's always something going on, always an event, always an opportunity. It's just, I think we talked a little bit about it earlier, the confidence to be proactive and go after it. So thank you so much for that wrap up. Those of you that are listening with me, thank you so much for joining me on today. Thank you, Sandra, again for hanging out with me on today. And until next time, guys, live life empowered. Thank you for coming to the living room again.